Hello, everyone. My name is Ed Monk. I'm the owner of Last Resort Training and Consulting. I'm a retired Army officer, a former school teacher, a current law enforcement officer, and firearms trainer. For the last 17 years, I've been researching this problem of the active shooter, and I've been providing training on it for about the last 13 to 14 years. For the last few years, I've been traveling pretty heavily across the country speaking to law enforcement agencies, churches, businesses, schools, and at conferences, trying to educate people on the active shooter problem, how we've been failing miserably on responding to it, and how we can do so much better. I'm going to be giving two presentations on the active shooter problem at TACCON. They're both standalone presentations, but the second one does naturally follow the first. The first one is going to be Friday afternoon. It's a 4-hour presentation called The General Study of the Active Shooter Problem and How to Minimize Victims. So this is going to study and look at active shooter attacks across the spectrum of locations. So it'll look at attacks at churches, schools, businesses, government offices, outdoor locations, and others. Well over 20 attacks we'll look at. And it'll look at successful responses to the active shooter attack and very unsuccessful responses. And we'll try to learn lessons from them. And one of the biggest lessons is that time and math are the most important planning factors when we look at how we're going to respond to an active shooter. I'll show you how our country has been failing horribly at responding to the active shooter threat for the last 40 years, mainly because they're not basing their response off of time and math. And what time and math clearly tells us is the only way to expect a low victim count in an active shooter attack is for the intended victims, the people there, the people he came to shoot. They must stop him. We cannot wait on responding law enforcement to stop the active shooter and have an expectation of a low victim count. We'll end with recommendations for how to plan for and respond to the active shooter. And what will not be recommended is what most people are doing now, which is run, hide, fight, and the famous lockdown drill. The second presentation I'll do at TACCON, again, naturally follows the first, but it's a standalone presentation. It's a 2-hour presentation on Saturday afternoon, and it's titled Considerations for Armed Responders to an Active Shooter Attack. So this is specifically meant for people who carry pistols and think they will or likely will get involved in stopping an active shooter with their pistols should they find themselves in an active shooter attack, or for law enforcement respond to an active shooter attack. It'll cover topics such as who is the active shooter, what are their ages, what are their motivations, what weapon systems will they have, what is their skill level on those weapon systems. We'll show that the active shooter problem, the threat of the active shooter who will fight, is much different than the mugger, who is by far the reason most citizens carry a gun outside the home. We'll look at the environment of the fight against the active shooter, such as the sounds, confusion, clutter, distances, and other problems that we can expect in that kind of fight. We'll look at gear and training recommendations specifically for that threat. And two of the biggest topics that I'll talk about in that presentation are safety rule number 4 and round number 2 of the fight. And you'll find out what that is if you come to the presentation. I hope to see many of you there to at least one or hopefully both of my presentations at TACCON. Again, this year I've requested from TACCON staff reclining leather seats and an open bar in my classroom. We'll see what they do this year. Huge thanks to Tiffany, who gathers, puts together, edits these presentations online for TACCON attendees so they get a better idea of what they want to attend at TACCON. That takes an awful lot of time and work on her part, and we appreciate that. And appreciate the Rangemaster staff for every year putting in the work to put on a great conference every year. Thank you, and see you there.